Candy didn't know what you meant by ghost. I do. That motherfucker did this to you. He was your boy, that kid. Always with his head in the motherfucking book. Vicious with a piece, though.
Now, the one character who we haven't really spoken too much about when it comes to Power Origins is Jukebox. We've spoken about the relationship between Ghost, Kanan, and Tommy. We've spoken about how we need to see this brotherhood, them terrorizing the streets, the three of them on missions, them working for Breeze, and really building this brotherly bond.
I didn't want to kill Breeze. I love Breeze.
We've spoken about how we may not even get introduced to Ghost. We may get introduced to just James St. Patrick, where we then see him earn the name of Ghost from Breeze.
We knew this guy Breeze when we were kids. He came up with Ghost. He said the kid had the ability to disappear. Never saw him coming, you never saw him leave.
We've spoken about the vulnerabilities and how they won't be the same characters we saw from Power, but rather grow into these three really ruthless drug dealers. From Tommy's perspective, we've spoken about how we need to see this lack of a relationship with Kay Egan, a junkie of a mom who spends all her money getting high, with Tommy having to fend for himself. Just like he said in 4 Season 2, he had to steal food from poor Mrs. Jenkins from next door. We've also spoken about their boss Breeze, and also working for Kanan when he crosses over to Power Origins. But what about Jukebox? There is a bit of history here between Ghost, Tommy, and Jukebox, and if they are to go by a few conversations that we had back in Power, I think Kanan's not the only character we need to see crossing over into Power Origins. I think there really is a case to be made where they do include Jukebox in some kind of plots and storylines in Power Origins.
Why you ain't telling me Ghost is balling? Not just drug money, nightclubs and shit. That just slip your mind? Ransom his ass. You get the money and kill him anyway. This way you break him twice. Once in the pocket, once in the heart.
So, let's remember some of the things that were said back in Power, because this is a character who was well aware of not just who Ghost was, but also how dangerous he was. She knew even though he was always kind of studying, always had his head in his books, in the streets, he was still vicious with a piece. Ghost had that kind of reputation as a kid back in the 90s. This double life that we saw back in Power in terms of Ghost being a legit businessman and also a drug dealer, the image that fools so many, including himself, didn't fool Jukebox.
You look good, Ghost. All dressed up like a fucking civilian. People really believe that act?
Let's remember, she was also someone who could see straight through Kanan's facade in Season 1, when he was acting like the tough guy after he shot Detective Howard. She told Kanan something very similar to what she told Ghost. You can't fool someone like Jukebox who's been through and seen so much. She's also very well aware of the world she lives in, the consequences, and also the players that kind of live in that particular world. And I think we've only scratched the surface of kind of what Juke's gone through in her early years, even though we are 3 seasons deep. But again, something to keep in mind going forward is, you can't fool Jukebox. She's someone who will see straight through your bullshit. She was also well aware of how close Kanan was with Ghost, how Kanan raised him to be a gangster.
He was your boy, that kid.
Kanan and Ghost loved each other like brothers back when they were younger. It's also why Ghost couldn't bring himself to kill Kanan, which eventually turned out to be a huge mistake. One of the things that I did agree with in terms of what Tasha said back in Power was, they should have got rid of Kanan when they had the chance. That was one of Ghost's biggest weaknesses back in Power. Sometimes you just have to get rid of any and all loose ends. Classic example, Maria Suarez. But Jukebox knew how close these guys were, and that's why I fully expect to see Jukebox in and around the mix at some point in Origins. She may not be at the center of the story like she is in some parts of Raising Kanan, because Origins will definitely be a more Ghost and Tommy kind of focus series, with no doubt the addition of Breeze, Curtis St. Patrick, and a few other well-recognized names from the world of Power. Whereas Raising Kanan, just before the premiere of Season 1, it was dubbed as a family affair, and that includes Jukebox. Now, even though Origins will be more focused on Ghost and Tommy, Jukebox will still be in and around Queens. She may join the army for a brief period, she may disappear and do her own thing for a bit, who knows, but she definitely will be in and around Queens at some point when Kanan starts to run the streets with Breeze, and also when Kanan starts to really build this relationship with Ghost and Tommy. Now, what Juke is doing at that specific time when Kanan is fully in the streets working for Breeze, again, big question mark, who knows, but we can make some logical guesses based on what we know from Raising Kanan and also what we know from Power. Is she still trying to make a breakthrough in music? I highly doubt it. I think that ship will kind of sail once raising Kanan comes to an end, if it hasn't already. Will she still be with Aisha? We know her relationships never end well. In my opinion, I think she's going to be focused kind of more on hustling, the way she knows how to. The way we saw her hustling in season 1 and the way we saw her hustling in Power. Jukebox at the end of the day is a hustler. We know she doesn't become a cop until much later on. The clue was in the news report which said she'd been in the police force for around 7 years. And we also know she doesn't get involved in the game that the Thomases are in. So, I do think she will be around, but she wouldn't have quite reached that stage where she wants to become a cop just yet, even in Origins. She probably is in between where the Thomas family is no more. There's no more Rock, Marvin, or Lou. Kanan's doing his own thing in the streets with Breeze, and they've also probably kind of drifted further apart. And I have said it before, I do think the relationship between Kanan and Jukebox is very complex. And I'm going to kind of refer back to a tweet that I found over a year ago when breaking down season 3. Courtney kept mentioning in one of her tweets that Jukebox was the one who gave Kanan his scar that he had on his neck. And if some of you guys didn't notice, Kanan did have a visible scar, as did Ghost. There wasn't a specific backstory that was written for the scar that Ghost had, but Maury Hardwick basically said he came up with this backstory where him and Tommy got into a fight back in the day, and that's how he got his specific scar. So again, linking this back to specific plots that we could potentially see back in Origins, maybe we do see Tommy and Ghost get into a fight and Tommy giving him this scar. After all, brothers fight all the time. We've seen it across each and every single Power show, and I'm sure those of you who are brothers also probably know as well. Now bringing it back to Jukebox, the same also goes for her and Kanan. Although that particular backstory isn't exactly set in stone, that's something the writers can kind of tinker with if they want. But with her relationship with Kanan being very complex, I wouldn't mind them taking a disagreement to a whole new kind of level. Sure, they definitely do love each other. We've seen and also heard how Kanan said nobody loved Duke harder than he did. But amidst their love, there has definitely been a few signs. There have been a few signs to suggest there are kind of cracks appearing in their relationship, and that crack will only continue to grow further, to the point where their relationship may even become sour. Especially the further Kanan gets dragged into the streets. We all saw what happened with Ronnie in season 3. Maybe they do get into a physical altercation. Maybe Kanan does something against the family. Maybe Kanan doesn't like the way Jukebox has been telling Rock about his business. From Nicole's death, which was kind of Kanan's fault, to a whole host of other situations. You can see this relationship between Kanan and Duke becoming very tense. To kind of explain this relationship that we got back in Power, it was a relationship that just felt really cold. There wasn't the love that we've seen in the early years of raising Kanan. So at some point in their past, something would have definitely changed. Something would have happened to the point where there's a really big shift in their relationship. We'll then have Kanan and Duke kind of doing their own thing in Origins, but they'll definitely still be in and around Queens. They'll be around each other because Jukebox knows what Kanan got up to when he was younger. She knows the path that he took. She knows who Ghost was. She doesn't specifically mention Tommy back in Power, but Tommy mentions Jukebox being a crazy bitch. So, you kind of have to assume if she did know Ghost, then she also would have known Tommy. She probably even knew Breeze, heard his name, or even knew who he was. Like I mentioned before, Jukebox is someone who is very smart. She knows who all the players are. Even though she doesn't get involved in this world or this particular game, she does know who all the players are. So Jukebox will definitely know what's going on in and around Queens, in Power Origins, that's for sure. Now vice versa, Ghost was also fully aware of who Duke was and what she was capable of.
She run these streets harder than some of these men. Love pussy, but ain't got no heart. Jukebox.
You really did see the fear in his eyes. Ghost was a character who always liked control. He always liked to be one step ahead and being in control over every single situation. But in this moment, when he realized that Tariq had been kidnapped and who was actually holding Tariq, you saw the fear in his eyes. Because he knew Jukebox is someone who doesn't mess around. He had fear in his eyes because he knew what Jukebox was capable of. Because just like she knew Ghost from their childhood, Ghost and Tommy knew her as well.
And remember Jukebox?
Yeah, that fucking crazy bitch.
That one. She kidnapped him. So Kanan fucking shoots her to save Tariq's life.
Jukebox was said to be crazy, and I do think we have seen the signs. I do think there have been a few subtle signs, plots and storylines to suggest how eventually she's going to kind of turn really crazy, but I don't think it's kind of complete just yet. I think there definitely are a few more heartbreaks and setbacks to come for Duke, that's for sure. I think she's going to have to suffer a lot more to turn really crazy, because at this moment in time, even though she has been through a lot with Marvin, Nicole, her mom Kenya in season 2, her music career being tarnished, there's a lot more that Juke still needs to go through before we get to see the real crazy Juke, and that's the jukebox that Tommy and Ghost remember from their childhood. For Tommy to mention that jukebox was crazy, I mean shit, that's coming from Tommy Egan, who's arguably one of the craziest power characters of all time. So, when we go into Origins, Juke is definitely going to be different. Ghost and Tommy are going to see a different kind of version of Jukebox. And just going back to her initial character description that was given before season 1, I think this pretty much sums up nicely in terms of just how tough she is. Possessing a tough exterior and a fiercely independent spirit, Jukebox is a no-nonsense force within the family and consistently holds her own in a male-dominated environment. She takes no shit and is tougher than most grown men. So we know Jukebox is tough as shit. We've seen how she's not afraid to kind of stand up to men who are twice her age, and in Power Origins, I think not only will we see a few of those moments, but so will Ghost and Tommy. Now will we see them interact? I think we probably will. I think the way they interacted back in Power, they definitely knew each other from back in the day, and that's something I wish we got more of back in Power. Some of you may remember me mentioning a while back, this is one storyline I wish they could have explored a little deeper, and might go into my kind of what if files. What if Jukebox did kind of live for one more season? What if she was the one to get rid of Raina St. Patrick? What if she did come to New York to create absolute chaos and mayhem for Tommy and Ghost? Because I would have loved to have seen Jukebox come face to face with Tommy. Two ice cold characters who are tough as nails. I would have loved to have seen what Tasha would have done had Jukebox been the one to actually get rid of Raina, because I think we would have seen a very different storyline at the beginning of season 5. So I do think we will see them interact. They will definitely know each other. Jukebox will be in and around Queens when Kanan brings both Ghost and Tommy under his wing. Will it be a major part of the story in Origins? Probably not, but I personally wouldn't mind seeing a plot in a storyline that kind of does involve Jukebox being dragged into Kanan's shit, where she does meet Ghost and Tommy, maybe even Breeze. I mean, I think we all know the kind of character Tommy is, even at a young age. If he's anything like the character we saw in the after end credits scene from OG Power, the interaction between him and Jukebox will definitely be hilarious. But I do expect Juke to be in and out of the picture, still maybe in Queens, doing her own thing, but also keeping one eye and ear open to what's happening in the streets with her cousin Kanan, what he's up to, who his new crew is, including Ghost and Tommy. It really is going to be interesting to see how they kind of integrate her into some of the plots and storylines in Origins, which I do think is a must based on previous conversations. But that's a bit about Jukebox and Ghost, and a storyline I do think we should see in Power Origins. There are a lot of unknowns and a lot of questions that I think they do need to answer, and as well as Kanan crossing over, I do think it is important that we do see Jukebox from time to time. She doesn't need to be a big part of Origins, but you can't tell this origin story without giving us this small history lesson that we learned back in Power. And by the time Origins does come around, Jukebox really could be that crazy bitch, who knows. We've got 2 seasons left to kind of see where Juke ends up by the end of Raising Kanan, which I have no doubt will kind of continue into Origins. But drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.